be.
That's right.
Ready as we'll ever be.
Okay, you're live.
Okay, so we're going to open up the Economic Board meeting at 5:07. Can I get a motion to open?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, so first thing on the agenda, we have discussion on the subcommittee topics. I know our business subcommittee talked a little bit. I know each one of you have a little bit to share tonight, so if you wanted to share what you came up with so far. Start with Dennis.
Sure. So we discussed getting a active list of all of the businesses throughout Groveland to have some type of reach-out program to better get an idea of what their interest is and how to make our industrial group stronger, so to kind of reach out individually. We got the active list. We'll have to wean through that number and get it down, get rid of some of the businesses that are no longer active, and reach out and just get ideas on what we can do to help their business grow and how to expand businesses in the town. And then we talked about the dispensaries, the marijuana dispensaries, pulled up the bylaws, what we currently have there, and what any potential future. We know it's tax revenue, additional tax revenue to bring in, so now that it's at the state level and moved through, the country has legalized for, we have both medicinal and, what's the other group?
Recreational.
Recreational use, so just something to kind of review and see if we can bring in some additional tax revenue. I think that's the key point here with the town, is try to get as much revenue in as possible. So we're working, that's part of the subcommittee. We work through that and we read through bylaws and go through businesses.
So, yeah, so how we arrived at the conversation was I had come in with some different ideas, and the short and the long of it, we discussed trying to find a quicker way to help bring money into Groveland to offset the taxes somehow. And what Dennis was just explaining was one of the topics we had discussed was possibly to help something quicker, to help lower the taxes and help the tax people. Angus?
Do you want to dig into that one or go
Yep,
through with brief
however you wanna
updates?
do it.
So I know, I talked to Rebecca briefly earlier, and it's my understanding that Groveland was a no community when it was on the ballot. So in order to zone for recreational, is it correct that there would need to be another townwide referendum that would have to authorize it? Is that the process that would have to follow?
That's my understanding, is that it would also not only require a town meeting vote, but also a ballot vote.
Okay.
And that was on medical?
Just recreation,
just
medical
like,
is
right.
required by law to be
So-
allowed.
So if we were thinking, or if the town was thinking to do like in maybe a back piece of property or something, a grow facility or a facility that would be more medical, I don't know if we could go that route, if that available?
We do allow for medical marijuana, and it is in the industrial zone.
Okay, and I know when it was discussed before, that the town people adamant not to have anything stores, nothing being sold recreational and what have you, so I know that was out in the out front, but I know it was left open for a rainy day, for medical.
Now, how long ago was that vote
It's gotta
taken?
be 6 years now, right? I was
2017, I
involved.
want to say,
17, yeah.
give or take a year.
That sounds about right.
For which one, the medical or for medical?
Oh, I was thinking recreational.
For
Yeah,
recreational.
I know it's 2019 here in Groveland. For
Wasn't it
medical,
all
I'm
at
not
once when we did
sure.
the medical and the? we
No,
voted?
medical is required by law now.
Oh,
You
okay.
can't actually ban medical.
Okay, all right.
So, yeah, we took a vote against the,
Yeah, I know that, 'cause I
recreational.
was involved in that one, and they said no, it was outright. So, I mean, that would be something we could possibly look into, if you could find some facility that would, and I know they're all state mandated and what have you, so you're not
Yeah,
gonna.
we just kind of spitballing, trying to see what
Right.
best course of action to bring in some additional revenue that
Right.
is kind of still, it's sitting out there. I know the tax rates are fairly high for the towns to bring in, and I think that's important nowadays with all the changes in costs, so
We should look at Georgetown. I believe they have a grow-only facility on the Raleigh line, and that's.
They sell
you said
now,
it-
too.
Oh, they do sell now? Okay, I thought the traffic was increasing
Yeah.
over there. But I wonder what kind of money that actually is bought in real dollars, and if that's going off the cliff, the way the Globe says it's been going, so
Yeah.
that'll be worth looking into.
I can do that. I take that action, yeah.
Yeah.
Is the facility that originally came to the town, are they still interested, or were they only interested in recreational, or?
That was prior
At
to
the
my
time,
time.
they were only water recreational.
Only?
And we were saying, we were saying to them, well, we could be open to medical because it's state mandated. Maybe we could talk about, at the time, putting it up on Salem Street. And they said, no, we really want the recreational because that's where they make most of their money at the time. And it was new then.
Yeah.
So, and then now it's out there, it's on the
yeah,
streets, people
it's-
see how it's run, it's managed.
Yeah, we don't even know if it's available.
Yeah,
If any
right,
companies
we
are
don't-
interested,
you don't-
right, but
no,
just to
a
leave it on the
topic,
table.
An idea or a topic.
Yeah.
I was thinking personally, I was thinking, is there more of a medical where they're growing it for the medical industry, not growing it for the street, but growing it for the metal? That's what I was thinking more.
Yeah, just, yeah.
If we could look into that maybe.
Another question I would have, it seems that the facilities, you see in, around the region have occupied existing buildings rather than built new buildings.
Yep.
So that would be, are there vacant buildings in the industrial zone that are already zoned for medicinal that could potentially be adapted,
Quick win.
I have no idea what
Like
goes
a quick
into
win, yeah.
adapting a building like that. But
Right.
they're not going to build new, is my point.
Yeah.
Like, they wouldn't presumably be looking for raw land, they'd be looking for a facility that could be adapted.
Okay. All right, anything else on that subject?
No, it's
So you'll-
just the beginning phases.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
then we'll kind of reach
exactly.
out and go.
Maybe
get-
you can look
learn
into
some more.
what,
I can,
over in
yeah.
Georgetown and
Yep.
see how that's going.
I think I know a couple people that have
I know
other
when,
dispensaries as well.
I know
so-
when it was before us before, and we had them in front of us, and I had drilled them down, and I said, listen, you guys are gonna come to Groveland, you promised us, and I think it was like 350,000 a year. I said, okay, for year one, we're good, we're gonna get 350. Year two, now they open one someplace else, and they open one here, they open one there. So say there's 4 of us around that are open, now you're gonna come to say, hey, we're not making the money, we're only gonna give you 250 and 100, and before we know it, we're not making any money. And when I drilled them down on that, they really didn't want to say, you're gonna be guaranteed that money. So I'm wondering if the money's even that good anymore, that's all.
Well, there was this thought 5 years ago that with the advent of legal recreational marijuana, that there would be a massive increase in usage, and that just hasn't happened.
Yeah.
The demand has not risen with the supply of shops, and you've actually begun to see shops closing.
Right.
So I do think it's something we should always be thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
because the rest of the state is thinking about it, but it's not something we're going to be counting on, I
Right,
don't think,
right.
especially in the short term.
Right. Okay.
One of the other follow-up items with our subcommittee was to look into just learning more about existing programs or grant opportunities the state offers, particularly direct support to local businesses, either existing or potentially, new businesses that might want to move into town. So as a follow-up item, I did follow up with a regional rep for the Mass Office of Business Development. She got back to me, pretty promptly, and it's very cordial. She said she'd be really happy to meet with the committee or meet with a subcommittee. So I talked to Bill about that as to whether we want to invite her into a future committee meeting or whether we want to first just get to I'm sure she'll come in and tell us about the whole host of programs they have. I talked to Rebecca. She's pretty familiar with all those, but obviously, back when she was the economic development director
Right.
at Planner, that was kind of her wheelhouse. Now she's got a million other things to do. So even though she's kind of familiar with them, she doesn't have the a whole lot of bandwidth to run with that. But she's had I think, good experience with that office. So I think having them in just so we
Maybe
can,
we
as
do
a
it with
committee,
the-
learn more and help.
Yeah, maybe what we do is bring it in with the subcommittee first, meet with them. Maybe Rebecca, we set up an appointment, we can all meet, because she knows what's going on.
Yep.
Subcommittee, we meet with them, get some ideas, and
Or
then
if
we
she
can
has
bring it to the
a,
committee.
she has some type of review that we can look at prior to, and then she can
Yep.
just come.
Yep.
It can be recorded, the town can see it, and then we can just add something to the website where they have access to get to it and go from there.
All right,
Kind of an
so maybe
overview.
you could work on that, follow up on that? That'd be
Definitely.
awesome.
Yeah, and I'll work with you on scheduling.
Perfect. Okay, are you, have anything else?
No, I just think,
Right.
I mean, it kind of could tie in with the outreach that we want to do to the local businesses. Because ideally, we have something to offer them.
Right.
So I think some of these grants are maybe accessible, but not everyone's going to navigate. And so if we can do that
Yep.
and kind of,
Okay.
that could tie in once we're ready to do like, whether it's a mailing or whatever to local businesses.
Perfect.
And giving them a point of contact is great help, right? It's a starting point. They don't know where to reach. I don't know, they don't want to just necessarily go to a website, click on something, open it up, and see an application. Just a lot of lines, a lot of work to do where they can reach out, talk to someone on the phone and say, hey, what do you think? This is my situation, and kind of get a straight answer. So it's great.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
one of our other topics we had talked about was 150 Center Street and how we could be a help to the development in 150 Center Street and where it was going. And at that, when we met, we were saying, well, we really don't know too much about it, and, we would need a town rep to talk about it. So hopefully, if you could, kind of bring us to speed, if anything we can do to help move that along. If you see there's any way of getting shorter money over there to help bring quicker tax revenue in. So,
No, that sounds great. I mean, we did do a lot of work with the study that we had performed with Mass Development, and more specifically with Niche Engineering, to assemble a concept that we could move forward with and bring forward to the voters to see whether or not they would want to move forward with something of that nature. So they did complete their study. It has been finalized. We haven't yet had a chance to fully release it. It is available to the public for anyone who wants to see it, but we haven't really necessarily had a full release of the report through the Board of Selectmen, but we are certainly working towards doing such. It's just been a very busy time of the year. I know that seems to be an excuse, but it's definitely not something I would like to use as an excuse. It's an unfortunate excuse. But we are definitely moving in the direction of releasing the report and opening up full discussion on such. But as you saw in your initial review, the revenue generated by the proposal is not much. I mean, it's a revenue. It's just not as much as we'd like to see from that property, obviously. So there is a need for further conversation to see whether or not we can do anything with the design as proposed from the, preferred schematic that was developed with the residents to what type of development they would like to see. In the interim and through those conversations, we also talked about more immediate ways that we could generate revenue, and one of them was solar. We talked about how, the development itself wasn't necessarily looking to utilize the full 60 acres of the land. We were only really looking to designate about 17 acres to development, and within that development, we were also looking to provide for additional green space, open space, and community spaces to be utilized. But that left the area that you typically see, the cricket field, and those folks playing over there, and that could be used in addition to the development for solar, or maybe in the interim, we could use a larger area and have a ground lease and work with the Groveland Municipal Light Department to get something initiated. So that was something on the more immediate future that we could work towards for revenue and seeing if we could do something.
do you think that could bring in obviously a quicker dollar, which would make sense? Or it's not that far along yet?
It could be if there's somebody who's interested in solar, so it's just about finding the right person and then figuring out what that agreement would look like and whether or not the town would be willing to enter into an agreement of such to allow for the use of the land for a certain amount of time for the use of solar. It's a much quicker turnaround than any development at 150 Center Street because, as you saw in the report, all of that will require us to do changes in zoning. That is part of what we're doing with our the other community one-stop application we got, a community planning grant that will look at housing and our zoning for housing, and it will also take into consideration the requirements that we have under the MBTA zoning or the 3TA zoning. So that will not only focus on the area that we've identified as potential for housing that would accomplish the requirements of the state, but it could also take into consideration all of those other areas that we identified as the comprehensive master plan, and one of those being 150 Center Street. So we could talk about zoning as part of that, and that could include a way for us to set aside mixed-use development and, different zoning for businesses and industrial that might be things that would be attractive for businesses in the area looking to relocate. So we still have an opportunity to utilize that as well. So, but that, again, it takes process and time, and that's not even going to be something we'll even have before the voters until 2025. So then, once that's done, then it's a problem, then the next steps are about, RFPs and et cetera. So the solar aspect is a little bit more of a quicker turnaround if you're looking, and there's an interest out there.
Is the fields that we have now interested? Has anyone asked them?
For the use of the cricket field, so
Oh, yeah.
they have expressed interest in buying the site. There's not really a long-term generating, revenue for the use of a cricket field.
No, I'm talking about solar.
Oh, for solar?
Yeah,
No, nobody's approached us as of date. We currently have a solar field that's over
Right.
at the water area,
Oh.
on Main Street.
yeah.
But
By-
we haven't talked to them
Okay,
about the
that's what I was
desire
asking.
for additional solar or anything of that nature.
I wonder if they would be interested, if we approach them, if it's something they might be, does anyone know how it's working out for them over there now? Are they doing?
They're doing great. They're actually taking in more energy than the system can hold, so it shuts off after a while. So it's not the energy that's the issue. For us, and the town's perspective, the agreement is not really desirable because it does not generate the
Enough
revenue
money.
that we were looking for. We barely break even on the agreement. It just doesn't make sense the way that it was written.
Right. and
Solar's
then-
become very, very inexpensive too. I mean, the light department does not buy solar, anything that would make it worth it for even a homeowner to put it on their roofs right now. And the incentives have all but dried up right now. So it's a tough ask if you're trying to make money on it. It's better than it becoming overgrown and not being used, certainly, but there's no, for the town's purpose, there's no long-term, gainable income from solar the way that the federal and state incentives are currently written. And the light department just doesn't buy it for much.
Okay. So, moving on.
I have, if I
Go
could,
ahead.
one or two follow-up questions. So I did take a look at the study, the mass development presentation. It was a few weeks ago, so it's town-owned land. So, and I saw the revenue projections for like the net tax revenue. Did they look at what the potential proceeds would be on land disposition? Is the idea the town would sell it?
It was that the town would sell it.
And is that any kind of one-time infusion, or is it fairly low? What, did they give an opinion as to what the,
They didn't.
because that would be, I mean, that's like one-time money, but
Right.
it's,
I think that the other thing that for us that we'd have to take into consideration is that we still own money on the land. So whatever we do for the land, we have to factor that in into the payment of the bond because it can't be paid off before 2035. We did talk to bond counsel, and we would be able to work out an agreement where we could eat with either the sale or ground lease of the property. So I'm not sure if because of that factor, that mass development didn't really take a look at that, or excuse me, the engineering firm didn't take a look at that specifically. But that is a good question.
okay. The other question, just more of an observation, you might have some insight from being part of that process, but I was surprised, the concept plan, I thought was interesting. You know, you had some nice elements, but I was surprised it showed the kind of retail commercial, or really restaurant commercial toward the back of the site, because in my experience, like, they all want to be along the street frontage, not tucked to the back. So from like a market viability standpoint, what went into that? Is that like decided, or is that still in flux? I
It
mean,
was
I think it's all still in flux, but.
Yeah, it's definitely conceptual in nature. I think what the firm tried to do is they tried to take into consideration a lot of what people were saying about the development, and a lot of it was that, that's not really what you have in Groveland. So they wanted to keep it further into the site so that it didn't sway from the aesthetics of that area in general, so that, you could go there, you could be there, but you didn't have to drive by and know it was there, kind of thing. There was a lot of aversion to having development at all at that site, and the way that they kind of felt as though that it would fit in with Groveland was to make it its own little village in the back.
But it's not, as you know, it's not enough units to create its own market. I mean, it's, for something to succeed, it's got to have visibility. People need to be able to see it. And there's ways to do that, I mean, I don't live across the street, so I get that, and I get it's not.
Whatever we do in there, at the end of the day, the number at the end of the year has got to come out to be a good number to make the town money too. We don't want to have something that we're putting in and it's going to be flatline, we don't make a lot of money out of it, so.
Or no one ever builds it, or they build the housing because there's a market for that, but they never build the commercial because it's at the back of the site and it's not got the drive-by and not that there's a whole lot of traffic. I mean, it's not a great site in the first place from a visibility standpoint. It's a challenged site. So I think putting if commercial or retail, whether retail or restaurant, if it's going to work there at all, I think would need to be visible from the road.
I think the other commentary was that if we were to do anything at that particular site, they would also try and put in a draw so that's created automatically from people being drawn to the site by either a community center or a senior center with the senior center type housing that could then also utilize that type of establishment. So I think that was also the other concept that they were going for, an attempt to accommodate those commentary about not wanting to have it, wanting to have it more so blend in with what was already existing. There's also some wetlands towards the front of the site that are going to be challenging to contend with, and there's also turtle habitat that goes over to the side of the property towards the church side. So the street frontage for the property is not as wide, not large enough to really capitalize on two buildings right on the front of the road. Not to say it can't, but it'll be a little bit more challenging. But definitely something we did talk about. It was just something that many people wanted to steer away from.
It's a shame we didn't have this conversation before they did the Pines down here, because really, and when you look at the Pines should be on Center Street, and the development should be right here. It's kind of backwards. To me, it's a shame.
Pines is a high visibility site.
Yeah.
But that,
You put so much money into it already, it's just,
it's a beautiful site.
yeah, but, I mean, that's the ideal spot for Fields, is on Center Street, not, so. But it is what it is.
So moving on, I don't know if this is getting off a topic a little bit, but Washington Street, Valley Screw. I know that we cannot, I'm probably going to say it wrong, you can help me out with this. Cannot use our free cash, or what's our money tied up every year, because that property has now got us out of the
Overlay.
overlays. There you go, overlay. So my point was, I had worked on this pretty intensely with the past finance director and a couple of selectmen. We met with DEP and what have you. We had a deal almost done, but COVID hit. I didn't know if the town would be willing to go back and have that conversation again, or you guys have a different idea of what's
We're-
going on there.
We're certainly amenable to having any type of conversation that we possibly can. When I originally started as a town planner, we had started conversations with the owner, or at least the owner's attorney,
Yep.
to see whether or not they'd be willing to work with us, whether or not we, try and work with the interest and they pay the back taxes and we take the property. They did not want to move forward in that direction, so we tried to do our due diligence and see whether or not there were any other ramifications other than the back taxes and the interest accrued on the property, and the AUL, which is the activity use limitation. We didn't find much, so we thought we would move forward with the foreclosure process just to get things rolling. As part of such and doing more due diligence, we did find that there were 2 liens on the property, one being with the EPA and one being with Mass DEP for the cleanup cost itself. So once we realized that there were cleanup costs associated with the liens on the property, we held the foreclosure and withdrew the foreclosure. So we have not decided exactly how to move forward in that process. I think they're the first time the EPA and DEP saw that the town was really, interested in moving forward with this and not just having a conversation. So they actually got back to me really quickly once we withdrew our foreclosure and said, hey, maybe we can talk to our council and see whether or not, if the town were to foreclose on the property, that we would in fact do away with the liens. Because for us, and like any community with a Brownsfield, they would essentially take federal dollars or state dollars to go towards the cleanup. So to have it kind of, be penalized for trying to just knock down the building and take away an eyesore, it's not really fair. So we're definitely open to having conversations. It sounds like the EPA and DEP are willing to have conversations with us as well. So we can bring in the senator. I know you worked with the senator very closely, and see if we can have those conversations. I know Mike Dempsey on the Conservation Commission is also interested in purchasing the property in the back where the church is and where the treatment facility is. That is currently for sale. We have had a couple of realtors call and comment about the property and see whether or not they would want to do both properties, which would be really great for the town, because the biggest thing for us is getting it off of our overlay and making it tax generating. The property in the back doesn't generate taxes because it's owned by the church, and the property in the front is obviously vacant and not being paid for and taken care of for many years. So we would like to maybe see if that would be something that somebody would want to do. But again, with not knowing the actual monetary figure of the liens, because it's not quite clear, I'm not sure anyone would be willing to take on that burden.
Are those liens related to the Superfund designation? That's a
And
product of that?
Specifically the cleanup
The
itself.
cleanup itself, okay.
So what, the last meeting that I was in with them was that, to try and do it quickly, the land is contaminated still, to the point where it's clean, but you're never gonna put a building on it. They want you to put like a cap, they want you to put like, it's almost like a rubber cap, and they cap it and they put dirt and what have you, once the building's gone, and it can be for passable use only, they were saying. So, we talked to the EB, we talked to everyone, Senator Tar, it came out to this where Senator Tar said, listen, I have a big need for elderly housing, and what I'm willing to do is I know I can get it done, the DEP and the EPA, to release the liens, turn around, use the housing, I'll take it over, get my housing development, whatever he had involved, we would turn around and then put a building in there, tear that building down, put a building there, it'd be all state and federal, the town of Groveland will be released, get their money back, and that was gonna be it. We were close, but like I say, COVID came, and the meetings were basically shut down at that point, and then, you know, I don't know if we can I can make a call if you guys are up for that, or if you wanna call, I mean, I'm very friendly with Senator Tar, and maybe we can get the DEP and the EPA together, it's up to you guys, and maybe as a subcommittee, and whatever, maybe, I can make the call and see where we can go, it's up to the board, and I don't wanna step on anything, you know what I mean? I know we were so close at the end, he said, listen, I'm bringing in the housing to the next meeting, and what have you, so, we were right there, but it got shut down, so. It wasn't shut down only because of COVID, we couldn't meet, everyone got locked down, so I ended up not being a selectman, and the past finance director left, and it kind of fell apart.
So Valley Screw and the treatment plant are different properties? Okay, so I can't talk about the treatment plant because I own a property that abuts it.
Yep.
But as far as Valley Screw goes, I think it certainly makes sense for us as a committee to explore something that removes that from being a non-tax-paying,
And that's quicker
fenced-off,
money-
troubled property.
That's quicker money to the town.
I agree.
Because it's gonna get
That's
the money
actual
back
money, yeah.
in the town. They can now release it.
Well,
and-
it's the $225,000
It's-
that's sitting there that
Right,
we can't use.
Right.
We have to-
So that's gonna be the quickest route to get some dough. And I know you're in butter, but I watched the meeting on TV the other night, and I heard the whole conversation. That back piece of land is landlocked, and if you go deep into the covenances of when they did this filtration plant, they were deeded the right to pass over that land to that building to the day they were done, which I don't think they're done, because I think they have to keep it plowed, and they have to keep it maintained for the wintertime, but they have some kind of a deed, it was written in there, they can pass over Valley Screw land to get to that back building, but that's a landlocked piece of land. That building back there, I don't believe you can get into that unless you went onto the town land and around in the back way from Strawberry Fields. So, I mean, that could all be brought up again, but I don't think that's very accessible, so I don't know how, it could be valuable to someone that wanted that and the Valley Screw, yeah, but you're not putting homes on Valley Screw, I can tell you that. In my meetings, they said, no way. Fire station, town hall, with people come and go, they don't stay there all night, and he said they have the money to make it the way it needs to be to put the housing. The state has the do-re-mi, and they need it, and they'd make it right to put the people there, so.
Do we know the state of the cleanup? I know the Superfund is closed there.
Yeah.
Do we know, and is there a report in the last X amount of years that will tell us what the state of the land, as far as it being contaminated or not, is? Because I think that step one in this process is to figure out what that is.
Yep.
Because if there is permanent contamination, or contamination has to be encapsulated somehow, that affects, I think, our work from here.
So I'll let you talk, in the meeting, I can tell you, in the meeting, I brought it up in the meeting, because I drilled them down, I said, listen, that building has been leaking, at that time was 3 years, and our building inspector went down, we had him go down, he said, I can't do nothing, because once the walls implode outward, I can do something, but if they don't implode outward, I can't. So I had drilled them down and said, listen, the water's leaking in the building, it's going in the floor, it's going back in the ground that you just cleaned. And they said, listen, we don't care about the building, we've never been inside the building, for the most part, we don't care. So if you people tear that building down, I said to them, you rip the foundation out and you find contamination under that building, do you own it again? They said, as far as we're concerned, no. So whoever does end up taking the building, it could be, but as far as they're concerned, they were saying the property around it and the water and everything's all set. And they monitor it yearly.
So when you look at the report's on the website, it just says that the EPA conducted an optimization study for the site in 2012 and developed an exit strategy in 2013 to complete cleanup actions. The optimization and exit strategy concluded with active groundwater extraction and treatment activities could cease because the electrical resistive heating ERH cleanup removed the massive residual CE contamination in the source area soil. Therefore, it was appropriate to transition from active treatment to monitored natural attenuation, which includes more frequent and extensive groundwater monitoring. In January 2020, Mass DEP auctioned off the groundwater treatment equipment and is hiring a contractor to decommission the plant, which they've already done. And then they say that there's an activity and use limitations, and essentially that EPA calls institutional controls that will reduce exposure to contamination by limiting land or resource use. They also guide human behavior, for instance, zoning restrictions, prevent land uses such as residential uses that are not consistent with the level of cleanup.
That means it's as clean as it's ever going to get in our lifetimes.
Right.
Okay, that's understood.
Okay, so enough talked about that. So, I mean, I can make a couple calls, I can work with Rebecca and see what we can do and get it back online again and have that conversation, I guess. And then I had talked to Rebecca and we talked about it again, but I know a couple of us had talked about the old highway garage. I made a phone call. I talked to a local company to come in and take the land down to a grade where it would be usable for possibly a road to the Bagnell, and then either lease it or sell the land or what have you. Short and along of it, they said they'll take the rock, but they're not gonna lower the land. In the interim, I had made a couple phone calls to a couple people possibly wanting to lease it. They said they'd rather have the land leveled. And then I had talked to Rebecca, and she had her thoughts, and I'll let her say what her thoughts were.
For me, essentially, I just think it's far too important to make sure that we have an alternative access to the Bagnell Elementary School. Currently, we only have one way in and one way out. We have a paper road that takes the school to the Yale-Harvard area, which is great, but it's a paper road, and we do not own that paper road. So the fact that, you know, we recently saw everything that happened with the Whittier Tech Vocational School, and the fact that now trying to bring that up to code, you're going to be required to also provide a secondary egress to the property to sell that property and prohibit us from moving forward and providing that in the future if we were to need to either expand and or renovate, or if we wanted to do a new school on site. I think it's really important to make sure that we can provide that. If we can work with somebody to understand that that component is very important to the town, I wouldn't be opposed to looking at a way to auction a portion of that property off to a business that we could also achieve that access, but it's just very important to make sure that we do so in a manner that allows us the opportunity to be flexible given the situation we may find ourselves in 5 to 6 years or so. So that's my only concern with moving forward and making sure that we don't, you know, prohibit us from making the right decision in the future.
Okay. That being said, we would have to know what kind of access road and how wide you would need it to get in there. And then, once that's said, you know, what's left for a piece of land up top there that could either be sold, leased, or whatever. So that would be something that would have to do a little bit more due diligence, investigate, and I don't know how you would go about it as far as money to do all that. I mean,
So there's a lot of different grant opportunities that we can explore. I think there's also a potential to use CPC funding if we're looking at potentially creating additional parking up at the playground area that's up at the school currently. I know that a big security concern has been in the past that people drive to the school area during the school day and park in the back to utilize the playground, which you're not necessarily allowed to do during school hours. And I think sometimes that causes an issue on the weekend as well, and it opens it up for people to go exploring when they really shouldn't be. So to have another alternative access and a way to park near the actual playground itself might be something that would trigger community preservation funds, at least maybe even so much to say that we use those for the design element and seeing what it would cost and how we would go about potentially getting the grades necessary and the width and whatnot, and maybe survey, et cetera, and that might, you know, be our starting point before we have to try and find maybe, you know, more construction-oriented funding.
and would that be something this board could do, or, okay,
I believe there is also an easement off of Yale Street as well that's a lot more flat and accessible too. Do you know about that?
That's the paper street.
So is that,
So the owners own it, so we could have a conversation with them. That doesn't give you direct access to a main thoroughfare, you have to go through the residential
Yeah,
neighborhood, so it's
yeah,
a
it's
little
not
bit.
ideal.
Yeah, just for like a straight shot flow, like if you had like an emergency vehicle, and like, we talk a lot, unfortunately about school shootings and, the proper protocol to go forward and how you would do that, and, where would the children go and how would they, if somebody came in and blocked the actors off, like, how would you get them out? And so you would want them to be able to get to like a Salem or a School Street that's, a direct shot
Yeah,
to get where you need to go.
definitely.
So that being said, what you just said would be a good thing if we went with this and try to go for the CPC funds and what have you, because we're also killing two birds with one stone. We're making another access to the school. We're talking about possibly potentially selling or leasing a piece of land. So I think this would be a plus for us to move forward with.
I agree. I think it's a perfect use of CPC, and we've used CPC on the Bagnell property in the past, which of course the town owns. We used it for the playground, but this is also using it for something that will have benefit for the town long-term.
Right.
So it makes perfect sense for us to explore that option.
Okay. And one question I had for Rebecca. When we go to try to sell and adopt and lease land, can the town of Groveland do that? I know we can sell because it has to go out to bid, 3 competitive bids, but can the town of Groveland actually, are we available, can we actually go say, okay, we have a parcel of land, we want to lease it to someone? When I I was involved, you can't do it because there was something involved where you can't take that kind of money without having to adopt something. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure about the adoption. I mean, you'd be able to put out an RFP that would be a competitive process and say, we're looking to utilize or have somebody lease the property for A, B, and C. I mean, I think, it's almost similar to what you see in West Newbury. I know has a daycare on town property, and they're able to issue an RFP, and people respond to the
there
RFP
is
to
ways to do
utilize
it
the
then.
space. So I think it's a similar thing of a disposition of property that you would be able to go through in order to do that. I mean, you've dealt with it more frequently than I have.
That's exactly right. It's the same threshold as if you were purchasing and selling. Whether you're purchasing and selling, it's the same threshold. So right now, it's a $50,000 threshold for RFP, but below that, you still have to seek competitive bids. It's just not as, quite as bureaucratic as the RFP process. So if the annual value of the lease exceeds that threshold, you have to do a full RFP. One of the other things to be aware of is a town can't enter a contract beyond a certain number of years. I think it's 3 years without town meeting approval. So if you were entering a long-term lease, you would need town meeting approval to do that. I don't know what the maximum term town meeting can authorize for, but for someone to, if you're talking about someone, doing like a ground lease to build something, it'd probably be better off to sell that portion if it remained a buildable lot. I don't know what the minimum lot size is in that zone, and if it would be feasible to preserve a future right-of-way and still have a buildable lot. But I would think, someone in the private sector would be more interested in owning the land, as opposed to if there
Right.
was a building there, they might consider leasing it, but no one's going to lease land to build a building because they don't control it in the long term.
And any land that's sold has to be out, the town of Groveland has to put out the bid,
Yes.
3 competitive bids.
Well, yeah, well, it depends. Is it a land of low value? Are we auctioning? Like, it depends on how you go about it.
Right, well, before we had sold some land, well, one parcel got sold, and I do believe we had put out the competitive bid.
That's one way.
Yeah. And the other way would be,
Again, if you auction off the
oh,
property,
yeah.
what's the highest bidder at that
Okay,
point?
Okay. All right. So that being said, do we have any land in Groveland? I don't believe there's a lot tax titled, or biggest parcel would be Valley Screw. Nothing that we could zero in on and say, well,
I have another note to myself to pick at the tax title list again to see if there's anything that popped up since the last time we looked at it. The treasurer collector has been doing a phenomenal job at trying to go through that list and get properties off of the tax title list and, foreclosing and making sure that we're getting our collection rate. I don't believe there's anything that's on there from the last time we looked that was really like attractive to do that. Like, I know that we're unfortunately dealing with a lot of unknown properties, which is not a good situation to be in, trying to track down titles, et cetera.
Owner unknown?
Yes.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
That's
it's brutal.
very tough, yeah.
And then the other thing that we're having trouble with is that unfortunately, the planning board during a course of time wasn't transferring over property associated with their subdivision, so there's like small strips of land that abut the roadway that the developer still owns, but already sold all the houses, and it was done in the 90s, and now we have this parcel that's in tax title that we don't own, and getting them to pay that, and then with the understanding of like, please pay back taxes, we'll take it at the next meeting, because it was supposed to be taken all along. It's been a process in and of itself, so, but that's not attractive. There's just a couple that I can think of that abut maybe a paper road that might be, more attractive for development of some sort, but not substantial sizes or anything of that nature, but I'll run another.
Yeah, and the reason that, maybe I didn't explain it well enough, the reason I was talking about the leasing or selling the land was because I don't know if there's a situation where some yard backs up to a piece of land that's owned by Groveland, but they want to make their yard bigger, like their backyard bigger or something. I didn't know if that's kind of where I was going with it, you know what I mean? Like, it's a,
So I've had a couple of people call about things like that. I know that they like abut a town road or a town property, and they want to take the town property and add it to theirs. I know somebody had done that over by the Pines, and I know somebody had done that over by the Shanahan Field. We don't have anything in our zoning that allows for such, but one of the individuals had brought to my attention that there's a zoning regulation in Merrimack that actually allows under a certain threshold that would allow you to work with a property owner to absorb that land. I'm not sure how that would work from a procurement standpoint and how that offers like a competitive aspect. It was confusing to me, but I actually never looked into the actual zoning that they were referring to, so I can do some more research into that and bring that back to the board so that
Yeah,
they
that
can
would
take a
be
closer
awesome.
look.
okay. Let me see here. I think I've got everything out. Does anyone, do you have anything?
No, nothing else.
Steve?
Just, again, the property, I talked to a few different businesses about their needs and their wants, and, I mean, it's just, there isn't a lot of commercial property in Groveland for businesses to run. It's just, it's unfortunate, but it's the truth, you know? So, you know, I think a lot of people are limited on the size of an operation they can have or where they can have it, and I guess until something comes up or something changes, it's kind of in a, you know, lock, a stalemate, you know? I know that there's something going on next to Groveland Gas. They're doing a commercial yard there where people can rent and stuff, and I mean, that's great for them. I don't know how great it is for us. It must be better than what it was before. So, I mean, that's another good thing, get some more businesses, but there's not a lot you can do. I mean, I guess maybe look into trying to get those businesses that are gonna rent registered in Groveland with their businesses, you know? So, say you're renting there, but you're really from, say, Danvers, your business. Well, you know, since you're operating out of here, there has to be some sort of regulation as far as that's concerned, right? I mean, you would know better than I, but, I mean, if they're operating out of Groveland, business use permit, or there's gotta be something, occupancy permit, you know?
Yeah, I mean, only if they're a corporation would they have to register as a DBA. You wouldn't necessarily have to register with the town if you're not operating as such.
Oh, all right.
You do, I mean, if you're doing, you know, building permit, you'd have to, you know, go through that process, but otherwise, I'm not sure how we would capture the registration of other you know, other businesses.
I mean, it's just, so I rent a yard in Haverhill, and the owner at the yard said to me, oh, I need you to apply for, I'll figure out the language for you, but I don't think it's a big number, but at least, you know, get them registered in Groveland and at least get something out of that, you know, besides the tax revenue. But I don't know what else you can do. It stinks, but it's, you know, we're mostly residential here, you know?
I think that the biggest challenge with Groveland is not necessarily looking for land to develop. I mean, it would be great if that was the case, like you said, but, you know, and if it comes up because a parcel becomes vacant and we can join two parcels together and make that land available for such, that's even better. But I think for us, the focus should really be trying to get the resources to the current businesses that are there. Do they need sidewalks? Do we need infrastructure? Do we need sewer? Do we need visibility? How can we make sure that people know that we're not off the highway, we're not off for 495? How do they get there? Do they have enough, you know, adequate, you know, ways to get to the businesses that they currently have? Do they have enough parking? Can we help them? Can we provide, like, you know, Angus was saying earlier, like, with resources from the business office, like, vacant storefronts and other types of initiatives that allow them to stay here, use those funding, and then attract more people there.
Yep.
But that's very tricky too, like you said, because most of the businesses don't really have the foot traffic that you would really.
Yeah,
need.
it's just, it's tough, but.
One thing as a subcommittee we talked about was, there's two properties down on Salem Street. One of them I had spoke to, and they're willing to do something, but like we were saying, it's like 15, 18 acres, and possibly the person next door had 38 acres, but the point is, it's not something that we're gonna get done now. We need to do something quicker to offset taxes. That's probably a 10-year project down the road. You gotta get them together, get them to possibly wanna sell, which one does, one doesn't, possibly he'll sell. So we're looking for a quicker means of revenue, I think, is at the end of the day on our subcommittee meeting, if I'm correct. Okay. All right, so I think it's getting close to an hour, and I said I'd keep it to an hour. So we talked about that, and did everyone approve the minutes of our last meeting? I know I did.
Motion to approve
Yeah, second.
minutes last meeting?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Is there any other items not reasonably anticipated at time of posting?
I have none.
Okay. And then, does any other board member want to speak on anything, future item, agenda items, or anything like that at all? Anyone want to bring some up to the next meeting? Anyone good? We pretty much kind of know going through the meeting what we want to talk about.
I just want to add, I really appreciate what the town's been doing with Elm Park, with decorations over the last couple of years, and I'm wondering what we can do the other 10 months of the year with that, in terms of putting some festive, whether it's lights, or LEDs can be made color changing. There's one of the rare times you can go on the Facebook groups and hear a lot of positive comments is about those holiday lights at Elm Park. That's our, for lack of a better term, central business district. That's where everyone drives through to get wherever they're going in town. It's looked really pretty around the holidays, and I think, there's a lot of the visible businesses, the non-industrial businesses are in that part of Groveland, and I'd love to see what we can do year-round to keep that looking as pretty and as vibrant as it does around Thanksgiving to New Year's.
So, we have a part of this committee, which is a subcommittee, and you couldn't make the meeting, but
Unfortunately.
you're welcome to join with Steve.
Yep.
Would love to.
And also, Chris Goodwin. That was what they were gonna head up.
I would love to be
So if you wanna
involved in
join
that.
with them, that's what they're gonna head up and try to grow on that.
Wonderful, excellent.
All right? Perfect. And I think that was pretty much it. Next meeting, when you guys wanted to meet again. I think we need to do a little bit of another subcommittee meeting before, so maybe a month out.
Rebecca, is there anything that ought to be on this committee's radar for Springtown meeting? Obviously, there's always the budget and, but in terms of policy issues or?
I don't think so. I think that I guess it could be an economic development type of issue, maybe, kind of. I don't know if my brain is just fried. But battery storage, the zoning changes that would allow for battery storage here in Groveland. I know that's a zoning bylaw that's coming forward, but I don't know if there's any other zoning-like initiatives. Like I said, we've retained the services of Inez Associates to help us with our zoning. And she's taking a look at the housing, but could also include mixed-use, industrial business, that type of stuff. Once those conversations get underway, I'll definitely be involving the committee in those conversations, so stay tuned on that. But I'm trying to think of any other, warrant articles that would be something that we've started to discuss or we're looking at currently that would make this year's town meeting. And other than the battery storage, which again would allow for, maybe might be a business attraction of some sort, I can't really think of anything currently. I don't
All
know.
right, great, thank you.
Okay. So, a month out, anyone have a time they want to use, or what's good?
5 o'clock is tough for me, so
Yep,
if it's
so you-
at least 5:15 to 5:30,
So
gives
why
me
don't
a
we
little
say,
bit of time,
if
and
it's
then,
5:30, we'd,
but as far as the month of March,
March 7th?
I'm not available that first full week of March, and then a couple days into it, but we have 9 members, so.
I will not be available in March, the 6th through the 10th either.
how about toward the end of March for everybody?
I'm good after the 12th, so.
Okay.
Anytime after the 12th is fine.
Me too.
John?
I'm free on the 14th. I'll be traveling for business after that.
How about the
but-
14th for you guys?
Works for me.
14th, Steve?
Yep, that's good.
Angus?
So far, so good, yeah.
All right, so 14th, and we'll do 5:30, is that good for everyone? 5:30 good?
Yep.
John, good?
That's perfect.
5:30, okay. And that's February, March, we'll do that right. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all, and we're going to close the meeting, if I put my glasses on, at about 6:50, I don't know, I can't even.
556.
5:55.
556.
5:56.
Motion to adjourn.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Perfect.